Wenn wir kämpfen, greifen wir den Feind frontal an. Und wenn wir ihn töten, schauen wir ihm in die Augen. Mit Mut und Respekt. Das macht uns zu Samurai.
So everything about it made us think this is the story we were supposed to go tell. We found it today. And, you know, years later, now you get to play it. What I always think about our story is doing is we're trying to transport you, someone who was born and raised in the modern world, back in time. That we're trying to build a time machine, literally inside your PlayStation, to take you back. And the interesting thing about Jin, of course, is that he struggles with some of the questions that probably all of us would struggle if we'd gone back into a time machine, where it would make maybe more sense to us to jump and hide from the shadows or do things that were maybe would be more reasonable to us than they were to people who were in the samurai clans back then. And so I think that's what makes him interesting and accessible, is that he's exploring some of the thoughts, hopefully, that the player will have, and he becomes your agent in this world. We were looking for a place that we thought we could tell a great story about a samurai warrior. We were looking historically through all of the battles and all of the fights. There's obviously hundreds of years of history to go through, and there was a day, fateful day for us, where we found the Mongol invasion of Tsushima Island. These 80 samurai defenders. These are all truth. This is all truth, and when we found it was, this is one of those moments, a moment of clarity. Doesn't happen very often, but it happened that day where you're like, this is exactly the game we should make. It has incredibly high stakes. You have this overwhelming force invading a small space. You have a tiny garrison of defenders that largely gets overrun, and it's easy to imagine one warrior surviving this initial onslaught and having to deal with this catastrophe. And it's you've got clearly drawn enemies and people that you need to defend. It's a compact space. It felt like we could make the entire island. So everything about it made us think this is the story we were supposed to go tell. We found it today, and years later, now you get to play it. A really interesting tension for Jin, and as such, as a player ourselves, is to understand that the samurai saw the world in a particular way, and there were very good reasons for them to do it that way, and it may be very different than the way that you think about the world today. You touch this, to take the time machine back and to touch the world of the 13th century a little bit, and it's something that video games can hopefully do in a way that no other medium can, is to put you into that place and have you feel those feelings personally instead of watching somebody else feel them. We talk about all the things that make the game, the little things that make it feel like it is what we expect from the Kurosawa, Mifune, these characters that we know. What is it that is their essence? And one of the things that is really unusual about the way that Jin behaves in the game is he's much more still than characters you're used to seeing in a video game. So the scene you're talking about is very obvious, where we have 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds where he's not going to move, which is a little bit unusual. But there's even more subtle things where in the midst of combat, where I'm fighting 3 or 4 enemies, I might make a fatal strike, and we will hold that pose for as long as we dare, a number of frames before we let Jin respond to your controller input, which 100% of the time, if there's another enemy, the player is mashing buttons and moving the stick, and you have to be patient. You have to say, no, let's hold that pose just for a few frames, so that then when I turn, it feels like there was some stillness there, and that he embodied kind of the picture you have in your mind's eye of a samurai. And so those details are very important throughout the game at being willing, whether you sit at a haiku and it's very calm and peaceful. You talked earlier about there's a lot of violence in the game, and there certainly is. It's a war, but it is balanced by these peaceful moments. And I think that's what makes the game whole. It completes that experience because it's not just wave after wave of violence. There are moments of violence, and then there are moments of kind of quiet and spirituality and peace, and those two things need to exist side by side for the game to actually, I think, be whole.